I'm Lisa Gable, and I have had amazing opportunities. At the age of 19, I went to work for the Reagan administration, and I worked at the White House and the Pentagon. At the age of 24, I was recruited to Intel Corporation by the man who had become CEO and chairman. At the age of 30, I had the honorary rank of a 3-star general. When I was vice chair of a Department of Defense commission, helping women become better integrated into the military and giving them more opportunities. And at the age of 40, I became a U.S. ambassador. However, today, I'm tasked with solving a very complex problem: food allergies, something that affects 85 million Americans and 500 million people around the world. What I learned from Ingenuity is to always demand unity of purpose. What I learned from former Air Force Secretary Barbara Barrett is always replace yourself with another woman when you're going out of a high-level position. Because women helping women is how we're going to solve the tough problems, whether it's giving voice to our food allergy moms or mentoring our rising leaders. And that's the purpose of this inspiring interview series. Resilience, diligence, optimism, those are the defining characteristics of the women I'm going to introduce you to. So welcome to Breakthrough. Today's episode is about diligence. Joining me today is a woman who's been one of the highest ranking women in the area of trade promotion, representing the United States in expanding to new markets and maintaining strong relationships with existing markets. Margaret, also known as Maggie Hanson-Muse. A second-generation senior foreign service officer, Maggie has a network few can match in foreign governments and industry across multiple continents. Every time I call her, I seem to be saying, do you know anybody who fill in the blank? And inevitably, she gives me 3 to 5 fantastic introductions. Maggie and I met at a C-suite women's retreat in Ecuador in 2006, and she has been a dear friend and a colleague since. Maggie, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Lisa. Thank you for inviting me to the program. I am Maggie Hanson-Muse. I'm a second-generation Foreign Service officer, as you mentioned, meaning I was born in Calcutta, India, and grew up in West Africa and Latin America. My father was a Foreign Service officer. That's what second-generation Foreign Service officer means. And I have spent the last 28 years with my girls living in different countries. My job is being a commercial diplomat for the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. So that means I was helping U.S. business with their problems entering markets and staying vibrant in markets. I worked on free trade agreements, or I worked on trade promotion, meaning helping set up trade fairs or helping them find markets and distributors for their projects or products. Or I also help checking references for companies. The other part of my job now is working at the National Defense University. I work at one of the colleges called the Eisenhower School, where I'm the faculty chair for the Department of Commerce. And I work with students, meaning I train senior leaders or lieutenant colonels and colonels, and also people from other U.S. government agencies, so like the FBI, the Department of State, the CIA, as they are looking to become members of the senior executive service, or if they're in the military, part of the flag, being a flag officer or a general officer, meaning a general or an admiral or a higher ranking officer. I'm a mother of 2 adult daughters, and I'm also a grandmother. And I have been teaching leadership at the Eisenhower School, as well as global agility and biotech. I'm also the founding member of the Eisenhower School's Women in National Security Group, as well as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Affinity Group. I just feel very lucky to have traveled as much as I have, and to have learned different languages, and to also lived in so many different cultures. You get to meet a lot of fascinating people, many of whom are women.
Well, you've had a fantastic background. And to be honest with you, until we did the research to set up the script, I actually had not realized that your parents were Foreign Service officers or that you had been born in Calcutta. So it's this amazing legacy, as demonstrated by your beautiful outfit from Shanghai, your gorgeous paintings from all over the world. I think you said that one was from Peru. And you've just had this incredible experience, which is unique. And I'm not even sure people understand what the U.S. Foreign and Commercial Service does. And I've always told people I think the most fun job in the US government is the US Foreign and Commercial Service, because you get to promote what's special about our country and the products that we make. And so just, off the cuff, tell us a little bit about what the group does.
It's really funny. Last night, that's exactly what I was doing. I was helping to educate my students in the biotech industry study at Eisenhower about one of the aspects of what we do. Our big fight these days is to protect intellectual property. That is something very special that to America, and the US Patent and Trademark Office actually has attachés at different embassies across the world. We were talking to my colleague who is in the embassy in Bangkok, and she described her work, which is training judges and prosecutors, helping them to understand why it's really important to enforce patent and trademark laws. It helps create an environment where businesses feel comfortable bringing their technologies, bringing their advanced ways of doing business and ways of having products in a country to their markets. And also the same folks feel comfortable bringing their products to our market. They know that people won't try to steal their good ideas. So that's just one aspect of our business. We really try in the US and Foreign Commercial Service to support diversity, especially diversity of ideas and small businesses. And when I say leveling the playing field, what I mean is that we try to make sure that things are accessible to everybody. So that means having a good investment climate, meaning that if you get into trouble, you are able to access the law and access the court system, and it won't break the bank. So those are the kinds of things that we work on in the Foreign Commercial Service. We try to promote the products that are good and healthy, as it was in your case, trying to connect you with the kind of folks that would be supportive of your products.
Yeah, in fact, I got to know the US Foreign and Commercial Service because when I was the US ambassador to the World's Fair in Japan, they became my partners. One of the things that we did is we wanted to drive foreign direct investment into the United States. And also we had a lot of people affiliated with car manufacturers that were there. And so I learned a heck of a lot about paint. I never knew how paint was made. I really don't care to know how paint is made, but apparently if you have heavy paint, it slows down your ability to go fast in a car. So I learned all sorts of things through my affiliation, but became very grateful for what you do and for what everybody does in your service. So one of the things, just so our folks who are related to FAIR understand, is that, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, one of the first people I call when I really am trying to find someone who does something specific is Maggie. She is on my go-to list. And with that, when I started having conversations about where the relationships where FAIR can naturally and easily expand internationally, you were so kind to make introductions for me in Singapore. And I think you were based out of Singapore at some point.
That's correct. And, relationships are a part of everyone's life, but they really become vital to building your career. When I thought about that question before coming to this interview, preparing for it, I thought even more vital to relationships is the concept of trust, because that's the foundation upon which you'll build any relationship. And in my case, when you move every 3 to 4 years, it's difficult to know who to trust and therefore who to build a relationship with. The sea, as you would say, is shifting. So you have to start slowly. And in my case, I'm kind of ascribed to the Bill Gates theory, which is learn and read and study the history of a country and the history of the culture where you're embedding yourself. And once you start figuring out the culture, leverage your existing networks, talk to your graduate school alumni, talk to your parents. And in my case, my parents often had friends and family members in the cultures where I was going. For example, in Mexico, who knew I had an uncle who turned out to be the person who became my dentist? It's so funny. You just never know once you start talking to people and telling them where you're going. Also, you can talk to contacts from other jobs that you've been in, and in my case, other assignments. When I left my job working for Sprint Telenet, I never knew that I'd end up helping my old boss. He waltzed into my office in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, and he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I answered him in French and I said, "I told you I always wanted to be in sales in a foreign country, so here I am. How can I help you?" So keeping those relationships positive can always be a very, very helpful thing long term.
So I've got to ask, how many languages do you speak?
I speak fluently 3, and I'm kind of good at Portuguese, so 4.
Okay, so what are the 3? I think Spanish, obviously French, and
Spanish, French, obviously English, and then the 4th would be Portuguese on the Romance language side. I really watched my dad. My dad spoke 7 languages fluently: German, Swiss German, Italian. He spent a lot of time in Europe. And Russian. He actually would get up and go to classes and go learn to speak Russian as well. As a foreign servant, he spent 35 years in the diplomatic service. He was the 3rd African American allowed in, and actually coming into the Foreign Service, working for the State Department. His story is legend. He was sworn in, and then he had to eat his lunch outside on a park bench because the State Department cafeteria was still segregated. It was awful, but his class was, very supportive, and they would eat their lunch outside too until they allowed him to eat in the cafeteria. So it just shows that things changed over time. And I was the first African American female in the Foreign Commercial Service, and I kept working at it until I became the first senior Foreign Service officer in the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, and just try to model the behavior and be a good inspiration to all. So
well,
you never give up. You just keep doing your job, and you just try to be a good connector, and that's really what I've tried to do all throughout my career.
well, you are an amazing connector, but you're also an amazing role model, because I don't, in my own work with the U.S. Foreign and Commercial Service in the trade promotion categories of where trade happens within the U.S. government, I have not met many Black leaders in that community. And I would say you're probably a fairly small minority still within the group. Is that right?
That's correct. We're probably around 230, 240 officers, and I think there's maybe 10 of us, male and female. But they're making a real effort to recruit. It's just not a well-known service because it's a service within the service. There's many foreign affairs agencies. Believe it or not a well-known fact, the very first foreign affairs agency was actually the Department of Agriculture. The first minister counselor was, because agriculture has always been a very important export for the United States. And then came the other branches. And so little by little, people are finding out what a wonderful career it is to live and work abroad. It changes. It always goes through a lot of changes. And I feel like, looking back over the past 28 years, I've had an incredible experience, and I like to share it with other people. It's made me who I am, and I'm able to do a lot of different things as a result of the people I've met and learned from. It's a two-way street. You give to them, and people give back to you.
Well, and that's what I love about our relationship, is you're always very, very generous with your connection points that you've made for me in India and Singapore and so many other places. And then the people I meet through you are just so darn nice. They're also connectors. So I think, my husband was saying, he was listening to a clubhouse that I was hosting, and he goes, the whole networking and mentoring thing, I know we're all supposed to do it, but when I listen to you and Michael Frazier and some other people, and he knows about you, Maggie, that, for some people, it's an innate talent, and it's easy to picture us, on the playground when we're 5 years old, going out and collecting all the other kids. But you are the best. And so that leads to my next question, because I think people listening do struggle with this, which is you move a lot. And yet you maintain the most authentic relationships. And I think the word authentic is way overused, but it really does apply to you, which is you are not transactional in your relationships. And so, how do you move from different places, keep the relationships at the level that you maintain them? Where people love working on things that you're working on. It doesn't matter if you haven't talked to them for 10 years. They know that if the call comes from you, they're going to meet somebody like themselves. So, how do you do it?
Oh, that is such a great question. And I'm very sincere when I say that, because people always say in these interviews, oh, that's a good question. The truth of the matter is a lot of people accept every single request on Facebook or LinkedIn. I've made it a point not to, because I know I can't keep up with everybody. So I think one of the things you have to do is accept the fact that you're human and you curate your list. And so it's not an insult to not be accepted by somebody. And also, you shouldn't try to throw your hook at everybody. You should pick the people that you're going to be friends with. Make sure you have things in common. And so we're coming back to trust. When I was growing up in the Foreign Service as a kid, it was really hard to leave people behind. We didn't have WhatsApp. We didn't, a phone call from home meant somebody died. So you really had to pick and choose who you were going to stay in touch with. And so I refer back to those times. Who am I going to trust and who am I going to stay in touch with? And it's not from a point of view of who can I use. It's from a point of view of who do I want to spend time with? My time is valuable. And so I look and evaluate people on that basis. And I spend time talking to those people. So these are people that in one way or another, I will touch base with them at least once a quarter. And so it's a very refined list, and it's people that I have common interests with, and it's people that basically have a helping gene. When that gene truck went by throwing out those genes, they grabbed the one that says, I'm going to help. And so, and they're also somebody that if I got stranded in an airport for 8 or 10 hours, or like Tom Hanks, a week, a month, we would be able to hang out together. And that's important. They're fun people to be with. I want to always be with fun people, because who wants to be with boring people? Oh no, it's just, I don't have time for boring people. So, I look and we have hobbies that are the same. Like we like to scuba dive, we like to swim, we like to just go, we like to help people. We're giving of our time. One of the things that I was so grateful for, I met a friend of mine, she lives in Hong Kong. She introduced me to the Milken program for aspiring young women, and get up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning to have a call with a young lady in Bangladesh. She goes to the Asian University for Women, and I just listen to her, because what she wants to do is talk to somebody about what's it going to be like when I get out of college. What do I have to do to get a job? Now, mind you, these are folks that come from middle-class families from around Asia, but their reality is still a reality of wanting to connect to other people elsewhere. And so I just listen. I sometimes give feedback, but mostly I tell them good habits. Make sure you have an agenda for this call. Pick one topic. We'll focus on that one topic, and just be sort of like a big sister, giving advice and just listening. But going beyond mentoring, I also try to sponsor. I think it's really important. I give my word that I'll try to help them find an internship, and I do, and I keep my promise. So that's how I try to maintain relationships. I don't try to overcommit, and I also try to keep in touch, and I also try to keep my word. So those three things.
Well, and you do that. I have to also say, I mean, like I said, the Fairfront family is very grateful to you, because you did make these amazing connections for us in Singapore, and the relationships that have now branched out into other parts of China and Hong Kong and other places. And so you do follow through, as do your friends. But secondarily is one of our employees has a daughter who recently graduated from college, and I introduced her to Maggie, and Maggie has been just really a dear and following up with this young woman and making sure she was on track with her career. And so her mother, who should be listening, is very, very grateful wonderful because you do follow through. And I think that, that gets into some of the points, which is you've talked about, how do you lead these conversations? You come from different places. How do you enter into a country that you haven't been in before, although I think that's almost impossible in your case, because with your parents and with you, I think you've been everywhere. But when somebody enters into a country and they haven't dealt with that culture yet, and we tend to bring our American personality somewhat a little into play. And how do you suggest to people that they first engage? Let's say that it's in the informal, and then, the formal has a lot of rules and structures, and you and I've dealt with who sits where and when do you walk in and how do you bow and how do you hand over the card. But on the informal basis, that's where the relationships happen. So how do you approach that when you're in a place that it's not a culture you're as familiar with?
I really hearken back to going to Singapore. That was total culture shock for me because most of my exposure had been in the Western Hemisphere in Latin America, which is a very vibrant, lively, let's go dance, let's hug each other. And well, now we're in the COVID time, so everything is socially distant. Asian cultures tend to be a lot more formal. I was used to living in the Western Hemisphere, cultures where you get on an airplane with somebody, and especially in the case of Peru or Colombia, by the time you landed, you were invited over to grandma's house for dinner that Sunday. And they meant it. And they meant it. And if you didn't show up, you got a phone call like, where are you? We're waiting for you. We can't start without you. But in Asian culture, and especially in Singapore, because if you look at how they live, people live in flats or apartments. It's not possible. You just would be invited out to dinner. You'd go to somebody's house. And so the concept became, ooh, don't take it personally. This is just family has a different meaning. It's not this big, boisterous, outgoing, we can include you sort of concept. It's yeah, no, you're just not coming home with me concept. Didn't mean they didn't trust you, but it just meant we interpret family differently than you interpret family. So that took quite a bit of getting used to. In 4 years in Singapore, I was invited home once, whereas in Latin America, I can't tell you how many times I was invited home. Very, very, very different culture. So you have to understand that. And that's what I meant when I referred to earlier, understanding the culture that you're getting into. Learning the language, so important. It was very hard for me in Asia not speaking the language. I really, and because I covered 10 countries out of Singapore, yeah, I didn't even try. It was just too hard. I would have had to learn Laotian, Cambodian, Thai, Bahasa Indonesia, Bahasa Malaysia. It just, no, my brain at this age, nah, it wasn't going to happen. But so I just tried to be practical and learn a few phrases and also a few gestures and remember holidays. Like the big thing when the king of Thailand died, one thing I did was make sure I sent a message to my staff in Thailand, expressing condolences on behalf of our staff in Singapore, saying we are with, and, really just, they were gobsmacked is the best word I can come up with, but they were flabbergasted that the boss, down in Singapore would take the time to do that. But it really means a lot in Thai culture. The king for them was somebody very, very revered. And they told me when I came to the next post visit, when I had to go up and visit with them, they were really thankful and happy. And those little gestures, it means a lot as a manager to make sure you take the time to check in, see, and have that kind of aspect to the relationship that you have. In Myanmar, it was a whole different story. I'm devastated by what I see going on there now. I love that country. It's the most amazing country, but the political things that are going on are extremely complex, very difficult, and I hope that things work out for the better because they've made so much progress. But when I was there, once again, took a lot of time to learn the culture and understand the history of an incredibly proud people, where they've come from, where they were trying to head, and just make sure I understood when I was talking to the government figures, so that I could come up with strategies for our businesses to be successful. So again, understanding the culture that you're dealing with, understanding the history, understanding the impact of colonialism, something that we have forgotten because it's been so long. That was 200 plus years ago for us, but it's still very new. Singapore is only 65 years new. They really gained their independence from Britain in 1959, and as a nation, 1965. They're still new relatively. Vietnam, the 70s, whole different mindset. So things are very new for them, whereas we're a much older culture, and Europe is centuries old, millennia old. So just a completely different mindset, and people need to keep that in mind. And we can't go over there shaking our fingers at them. You should have respect for their culture, is what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Well, it makes a lot of sense as to why the National Defense University asked you to come and teach their senior level officers, because for people who don't know, that's the place where people are getting promoted, and they're going to be in major positions representing the United States, and also having a lot of people under their command. So Maggie, we are at the end point, and we have three primary questions. I always have to look at my questions to make sure I get them all. So the first question is, what woman inspired you to break through?
Oh, wow. Well, obviously my mom, and she's on my mind right now. And the other person who I really, really like to talk about is Katherine Johnson, the famous NASA scientist who got us to the moon and back safely. So those two, and Justice Sonia Sotomayor, fabulous woman, know her personally, and really was thrilled when she was named to the Supreme Court. So actually three women from three very different walks of life.
But amazing walks of life. And Justice Sotomayor is truly just a warm person who we've had the chance to get to know, and really an inspiration for so many women. So if you're advising young women, what is the thing you would tell them as women leaders, the one thing they need to think about as they're trying to break through to that next level?
Be kind and be courageous as you move forward, and don't forget what you learned in kindergarten. Be on time. And make sure you know your brief. Many people overlook those details. Knowing what you're talking about, studying up. Don't be casual about it. Be prepared. I don't laugh. I was a Girl Scout. I loved my years of scouting. It really, I think, gave me a foundation and a different view of life. But being kind, the world has become a very cruel place where people seemingly cannot even speak to each other without getting into a fight. I just find kindness is just something we really need to bring back to the world, and practice more. And that's what I tell my two granddaughters, Zoe and Charlotte. Be kind to your neighbors, be kind to each other, be kind to whoever crosses your path. It'll bring you more joy, and it'll bring you more experiences the kinder you are. Even when people aren't kind to you, it doesn't mean you don't have to be kind back to them.
Yeah, kill them with kindness, and that is something that I learned at home also, and is truly important, because you also don't know what's going on in that person's life and what may have caused them to have the reaction that they were having. And sometimes they can be your biggest ally if your kindness demonstrates to them that you realize something else is going on. One more thing. So if you have a woman who's watching right now, and she's re-entering the workforce, and that's a big issue right now. We have so many women that dropped out of the workforce. They're re-entering the workforce. Do you have a recommendation for how they need to think about their life moving forward?
That is a fabulous, fabulous question. I've written on this topic, actually an op-ed with 4 other authors. We've done 2 papers. One is a longer one, because the impact of COVID is with us for a while. I don't know if you're aware of the Johns Hopkins study that was done that was wargaming out coronavirus with no vaccine. That actually happened back in 2018 when we did our research. It's frightening how much we actually knew, but didn't, for whatever reason, we didn't do anything about it. For women reentering the workforce, take an online course in design thinking and then take a look at what you want to do with your career. Just free think, forget all of the old way of thinking. COVID has been a time to reset. That's what's in my article. COVID has been a time for you to reset your boundaries. You know, there's been things that have happened that nobody was expecting, and there are opportunities out there now that you have no idea exist. So this is a wonderful time to be re-entering the workforce. Do not sit on the sidelines. Jump in with both feet after you've sat down and thought about what you want to do. People are going to be more open and more excited about seeing you than you can imagine. So this is a great time to be re-entering the workforce. Thank you, Lisa. I'm so honored to have been invited by you to this talk.
I'm so glad that you did also. And thank you everybody for watching. We greatly appreciate our women who really set the stage and help other women to solve complex problems. So we look forward to having you back, and we thank you, Maggie, for being on today.